Welcome to In the Wild. Nachema was born in 1931 in Lublin, Poland, into a Jewish family whose life before the war was stable and comfortable. Her father was a businessman, her home filled with books and education, and her early childhood reflected the rhythms of ordinary European life. That world disappeared in 1939 when Nazi Germany invaded Poland. Within months, Jewish families were stripped of rights, property, and safety. Violence and persecution spread rapidly, forcing families to make impossible choices about how to survive. As restrictions tightened, Nehama's parents realized that remaining openly Jewish meant certain death. Deportations and executions were becoming common, and rumors spread of entire communities vanishing. The family chose a desperate path. They would attempt to survive under false identities, pretending to be Christian Poles. For adults, this was dangerous. For a child, it was terrifying. Every word, gesture, and reaction had to be controlled. A mistake could expose them. Survival quickly became tied to movement. Remaining in one place for too long increased the risk of discovery. So Nachama and her family moved between rural homes, farms, and hiding places, often located near forests. These wooded areas became natural shelters for fugitives. Trees concealed movement, muffled sound, and provided escape routes when danger approached. Yet, forests also brought exposure, hunger, and constant uncertainty. Travel often happened at night. Roads were patrolled, and strangers asked questions. Nehama learned to walk quietly, to observe before speaking, and to follow adult instructions without hesitation. The forest paths were cold, muddy, and unfamiliar, especially during winter months when snow covered the ground and temperatures dropped dangerously low. Hunger accompanied nearly every journey. Food was scarce, and those offering shelter risked execution if discovered helping Jews. At times, Nehama lived close to areas where resistance fighters operated in wooded regions beyond direct German control. Forests across occupied Poland and Belarus became centers of partisan activity, hiding thousands who had escaped ghettos or massacres. Life near these environments required constant alertness. Gunfire could erupt without warning. Patrols searched relentlessly. Safety was always temporary. For a child, survival meant learning quickly how to disappear. Nehama watched adults carefully and copied their behavior. She memorized Catholic prayers so she could pass inspections. She controlled facial expressions when hearing anti Jewish remarks, knowing any emotional reaction might reveal her identity. Psychological survival became as important as physical endurance. Winters were especially dangerous. Cold seeped through thin clothing, and fuel for heating was limited. Long periods indoors created fear of discovery, while stepping outside risked exposure to patrols. Forest edges often served as escape routes if homes were searched. Families prepared silently for sudden flight, keeping belongings minimal so they could run if necessary. Hunger shaped daily existence. Meals were unpredictable and sometimes consisted only of scraps. Nehama later described how deprivation changes perception, how thoughts become focused entirely on warmth and food. The body adapts slowly, conserving energy, while the mind learns to endure uncertainty. Children matured quickly under such conditions because survival demanded awareness beyond their years. Trust became one of the most dangerous elements of survival. Some people offered genuine help, hiding Jewish families despite enormous risk. Others betrayed fugitives for money or safety. Each new shelter required evaluating whether kindness was real or temporary. Living near forests meant escape was possible, but only if danger was recognized in time. As the war continued, shifting front lines intensified instability. German forces searched rural regions aggressively, targeting both resistance fighters and civilians suspected of aiding them. Movement through wooded terrain became more frequent. Nights were spent listening for footsteps, vehicles, or dogs. Silence itself became frightening because it meant not knowing where danger might emerge. Through all of this, Nechama survived not through physical strength but adaptability. She learned when to speak and when to remain invisible. She learned to accept uncertainty as normal. Survival became a rhythm made up of wanting, moving, hiding, and hoping. Eventually, as Soviet forces advanced westward, German control weakened. Liberation arrived slowly and unevenly. For survivors emerging from hiding, relief mixed with grief. Many returned to discover families gone and communities destroyed. Childhood had ended long before the war itself concluded. After the war, Nechama rebuilt her life, eventually emigrating and pursuing education. She became a sociologist dedicated to understanding how people behave under extreme conditions. Her research later documented Jewish resistance groups such as the Bielski partisans, who survived by building hidden communities deep within forests and rescuing more than 1,000 Jews. Her academic work grew directly from her lived experience. She understood survival not as myth or legend, but as a complex interaction between environment, chance, and human choice. Forests that once symbolized fear became subjects of study, places where ordinary people created fragile societies in order to stay alive. Nehama Tech's story reminds us that survival in the wild is not always solitary or dramatic. Sometimes it is quiet endurance carried out in hiding, shaped by cold nights, uncertain shelter, and the constant awareness that discovery could mean death. The wilderness she faced was both natural and human, a landscape where danger came from soldiers as often as from hunger or winter. As a child, she adapted to that world step by step, learning how to move through forests and communities without drawing attention, how to survive through observation rather than confrontation. Her survival was built from patience, intelligence, and resilience. In later years, she spoke about survival with humility. She often emphasized that survival depended partly on luck, on encounters with people who chose compassion instead of cruelty. Yet luck alone cannot explain endurance over years of danger. Survival required persistence, the decision each day to continue despite fear. Today, the forests of Eastern Europe stand quiet again, their past reclaimed by nature. Few signs remain of those who hid among the trees during the war. Yet, stories like Nechama texts remind us that survival leaves invisible traces carried forward through memory and testimony. She entered those years as a child, forced into hiding, and emerged as a witness to history. By surviving, she preserved not only her own life, but the understanding of how human beings endure even in environments shaped by violence and loss. Survival is rarely a single moment of triumph. It is a slow accumulation of choices made in uncertainty. It is movement through darkness toward a future that cannot yet be seen.